I'm Brian, and welcome to Vinyl Paints. And in this episode, we'll be doing a cell conversion from Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. This has been long overdue, and I've been really excited to do this one. And hopefully you can see right here the right consistency you want your paint. You're going to have to find with most of the paints you buy, you're going to have to add a little bit of water to get them to that right consistency. If you're surprised to see a new video out for me in less than a week, so am I. I really rushed this one out so I'd have something new for the Action Figure Comic-Con this weekend. And I wanted to do a new painting to get myself hyped up as well as get people excited for it. So if there's any part of this video that's a little bit unpolished, just know that I was up against some strict deadlines on this one. Just a quick note, I'll be appearing this weekend, January 31st at the inaugural Action Figure Comic-Con in Toronto. I'll have a link in the description below. You can kind of find out all the details. I'm really excited. Everyone seems to be super excited for this one since it's the first one. They're going to have cosplay, guests, and of course me. If you can make it, I'd love for you to stop by and we can talk some animation. So I'm going to take some liberties with this one. I think the animation in the Netflix series is amazing, but I really want to highlight some of the strengths of cell painting, of cell animation. So in order to do that, I'm going to make some changes from the original design. I'm going to add pops of color and add a little bit of color where I can. I'm going to go from the one tone that they use in this scene to a two-tone, which means I'm going to be using like a light and a dark. Everywhere except for the hair, I feel like putting it on the hair might be a little bit too distracting because you already have I call it the Scott Pilgrim signature lightning bolt in their hair, which I think is an iconic part, and I don't really want to distract from that. I'm going to do the eyes in color as well, and if you remember my pocket tunes from a couple episodes ago, I'm going to kind of do like a Euro thing on the eyes where it's going to be two tones with a glare. I think it will really add something to it. I don't know, but we'll see how it turns out. So for this painting, I'm pretty much going to be using exclusively chroma color, except for two things. I will be using a black. I have lots of Toon Tones black, and there's just a little bit of the eyeliner for Ramona that I need to do. As well as you can probably see here, I couldn't find a base for the inside of Scott's mouth that I liked, so I'm going to be using the Ropo Art Supplies magenta for the mouth. I'm also going to try my best to show you the different paints that I'm using, so you have some sort of reference as to what kind of color they produce if you ever go ahead and buy these paints. When I'm choosing my colors here, I really want to bring out the vibrance, and that's obviously one of the reasons why I chose chroma color. Chroma color is a lot more vibrant than Toon Tones and even the Lopo Gazai paint. Just their color selection has a natural brightness to it. This is kind of an exclusive for the AFCC con that I'm doing. I wanted to have something new for it. But the whole time I was painting this, the style, the way it was turning out, it was such a nice reprieve from doing smaller characters with lots of details. I was kind of kicking myself the whole time saying, man, I really should have done a few of these and actually just made a small animation. I think they did Ramona dirty here. There's no way that she would constantly change her color of her hair and not occasionally have matching nail polish. I also just thought it'd be like a nice way to kind of break up the skin tones because there's not much else going on there from a color point of view. So I decided to match her nail polish with her hair. So for the line art, I used Posca paint markers as well as technical pens. I didn't wait the normal 24 hours I usually wait for it to dry. I actually flipped it a few hours later on top of tracing paper or the protective paper it comes with, because I figured it would kind of like scratch it up a little bit, because if you notice in the show the lines are a little bit scratchy, almost like there's a grain to them or they're a peel. It's almost like they're trying to mimic old animation cells, so I figured this would be a good way to kind of get that effect. I know I showed two different yellows here. One is yellow 57, I believe. I didn't end up using the yellow 57 or the ochre 57, I believe it is. I just decided that I had enough yellow left over that I could just add a little bit of the burnt sienna to it to create my own shadow to it. And that burnt sienna is the same one that I used on the eyes, which usually really means that's going to complement it and bring it out a little bit better. We need to have a serious conversation on yellow. Out of all the paints, the one that I seem to struggle with the most is yellow. Whenever I put the light through it, you can see here, there's a lot of discoloration. And even when I started this painting, I knew the yellow was going to be a problem. So I decided to pull up an old Simpson cell and put it through the light. And much to my surprise, there was no issues with the yellow. It was actually a relatively consistent pigment all the way through. This is one of the reasons why sometimes I wish we had more options with paint, because whether it's Chromacolor, Toon Tones, all the yellows I've used, I haven't tested Ropo Art Supply yet, but they've all been lacking. And because this yellow is so inconsistent, I quite often have to do another layer or do a white backing to fill in the lack of pigment. I was hoping to talk a little bit about the show here. There's such a connection with obviously a lot of my backgrounds and a lot of my paintings and obviously a lot of the shows I do in Toronto, so Scott Pilgrim being such a Toronto-centric show makes sense. But for some strange reason, I wasn't ready for this show when it first came out. I got through the first 2 episodes and I found myself putting on the movie and rewatching the movie. There was just something, I wasn't ready to see an animated version of it, because the live action movie, I enjoyed it so much that I wanted more of that. And even though there was nothing wrong with this animation there was nothing wrong with this show when I watched it, I just wanted more of the live action. And now that some time has passed, I realized I'd like to go back and finish the show because I actually was enjoying it. So another one of those choices I did to bring out the color was switch Ramona's dress from black to purple. I wanted to really bring out the color, and the best way to do that was to change out some of the colors. The black would have probably looked fine, but just having a little bit of purple where I could use a little bit of 2 tones on the shadows, I think would just make it pop a little bit better. And just having that color is just like a nice change from the muted gray that they had in the show. So when I did this painting, I was on a bit of a time crunch. I had a busy week before the convention, so I really had to release it today, because if not, I don't think I would have had a chance before the convention. So that meant at times I was working with wet paint. I do not recommend this. Obviously, if you have a little bit of time, even just waiting a couple hours in between, it really helps. But when you're doing 2 paints, especially when they're bordering like I did here with the purple, it can get very dangerous. If you don't have enough paint, it can be easily absorbed into the next section. So just be very careful and be very aware of that is a possibility. When you're working fast, it means you're mixing fast. Unfortunately, the faster you mix, the more likely you are to end up with air bubbles. So you're going to see here, as I was coming close to my own personal deadline, I started getting a lot of air bubbles. I found a way to work around that, and that's to use a butane lighter to pop the air bubbles. It's something I learned from woodworking dealing with epoxy, but it does have risks, and I've actually had issues with it in previous projects. So I wouldn't recommend anyone do that, but I just want to say that there are options, and you can do it in 2 different areas. You can do it on the paint, which is a lot less risky, but then you can do it on the actual painting, which is way more riskier, and I do not recommend. But as you can see here, even though I don't recommend it, because of the time crunch, I did do it. I decided to have a little bit of fun with the skin tone shadows. By that, I mean, I just decided to just put the shadows in on the backside and not really pre-plan anything, and just kind of do it organically as I painted. As well, you'll see later on there's a drop of skin tone that gets on the eye, and I'm not rubbing it off. I'm just putting a paper towel on top of it to absorb it from the white of the eyes, because if it's not fully dry, the wet paint can seep through the other layer, and you can get like this weird discoloration. So just be aware when you're working with wet paint, it can be problematic, and to take your time and be careful. I wanted Ramona to have a slightly different skin color than Scott, and that's one of the problems with all of these paints, is there really aren't too many choices when it comes to skin colors. Chromacolor has 2, so what I decided to do was I decided to mix a color for Ramona, and I used white, burnt sienna, flesh, as well as just a hint of my Toon Tones orange yellow. So to finish this one up, we're going to put it on a Toronto background. And now let's compare it to the show. I'm not going to weigh in on which one I prefer, because I feel like that's unfair or maybe biased, but I really am happy with how mine turned out. I like the decisions I made. I know some of them might feel like they're taking away from the Scott Pilgrim style, but I'm just really pleased with how this one turned out. I hope to see you at the inaugural AFCC. Action Figure Comic Con this Saturday the 31st. There'll be a link in the description with any information that you may need. Once again, thanks for watching. I'm Brian, and this is Vinyl Paints.